Welcome, my dear ones. Settle in closely. Wrap yourselves in your warmest blankets. For today, I shall tell you a story of light that can scatter even the deepest shadows. It is a tale of a castle hidden within the mists, and of the truth that what is most precious is rarely seen with the eyes alone. Take a deep breath and let your imagination fly to a land where the stars whisper to the mountains. Once, long ago, upon the crest of a hill that was always the first to greet the morning sun, stood a palace of golden spires. In this palace lived a young prince named Valerius. Valerius possessed everything one could dream of. Libraries filled with ancient scrolls that smelled of cedar and honey. Gardens scented with the rarest jasmine, and halls lined with the purest white marble from the southern isles. The windows were framed in delicate gold leaf that shimmered like liquid fire, and the floors were made of polished blue stone, reflecting the sunlight like a calm summer sea. Yet within his heart there dwelt a perpetual winter. Prince Valerius was known throughout the land for his selfishness. He spent his long, lonely days admiring his own reflection in tall silver mirrors, smoothing his silk robes while ignoring the needs of the simple people who lived in the valley below. He could not see the grace in a stranger's smile or the music in a skylark's morning song. He barred the heavy gates of his palace to anyone who did not bring him gold or glittering gems. To Valerius, the world was a collection of beautiful objects to be owned, not a garden of life to be shared. One December night, as the moon hid behind thick clouds, a fierce blizzard began to howl, burying the paths in a white, cold silence. The wind screamed through the towers like a hungry ghost. Suddenly, a soft, persistent knock echoed at the great oak gate. An elderly woman stood there, wrapped in a humble, tattered cloak. She held only a single red rose, so vibrant that its petals seemed to pulse with a warm inner light against the falling snow. "My lord," she whispered as Valerius opened the door just a crack. "I seek shelter from the storm. I am cold and lost. In return, I offer this rose. It is a symbol of life that stays strong even beneath the deepest snow. A reminder that kindness is the greatest treasure." But Valerius only laughed, his voice sharp like cracking ice. "Your rose is worthless to me," he replied with pride. He looked at her tattered clothes with disdain and closed the heavy door, leaving the old woman alone in the freezing dark. But the door did not stay closed for long. A sudden, blinding radiance began to seep through the wood. The prince turned back in shock as the woman's form began to grow, expanding into a pillar of brilliant, golden light. Her tattered cloak transformed into a flowing robe woven from starlight, and her wooden staff became a beam of pure sun. She was the guardian of light, an ancient being who who walked the earth to test the hearts of men. Valerius! Her voice rang out like the chime of a great golden bell. Since you refuse warmth to others, you shall find none for yourself. Since you value only appearances, let your form become a mirror of your cold and hardened heart. You shall remain in shadow, forgotten by the world, until you learn that true beauty is born of kindness. In an instant, the prince transformed. He grew larger, his posture stooping. His skin became a smooth, cracked sculpture of dark obsidian stone, cold to the touch. His shoulders were draped in shimmering deep blue feathers that looked like the night sky. Branching coral-like antlers grew from his head, reaching toward the ceiling. His palace lost its luster, and the gardens fell into a deep sleep beneath a heavy shroud of mist. The guardian left him the rose in a crystal jar, its light the only warmth in the dark castle. You have time until the last petal falls, she added. If you learn to love and earn the trust of another before then, the curse shall be broken. But remember, Valerius, time is like falling snow. It covers the path if you wait too long. Far away, in a small village nestled at the foot of the mountains, lived a girl named Isabelle. Isabelle was a soul of quiet observation, with vibrant red curls and eyes the colour of a spring meadow. She lived with her father, Maurice, a kind-hearted man who spent his days repairing old clocks and musical boxes. Their cottage was small, but it was always filled with the comforting tick-tock of gears and the sweet smell of cedar wood. One afternoon, Maurice set off for a distant fair, carrying a special golden clock. But as evening fell, a thick fog rolled in. The path vanished, and Maurice found himself standing before a great rusted gate. It stood wide open. Seeking shelter, he entered the garden where, despite the cold, a single red rose bush was blooming. Thinking of Isabelle, he reached out and plucked a flower. Suddenly, the air grew cold, and a heavy shadow fell over him. The Obsidian Prince stepped out from the mist. "How dare you enter my private gardens?" he roared, his stone face dark with fury. "You wander through my home like a thief and try to steal my most precious rose. This is a wicked thing to do. One does not simply take what belongs to another." Maurice fell to his knees. "Please, kind sir, it was only a gift for my daughter." But the creature's obsidian eyes flashed. Maurice was led away to a lonely, cold room in the North Tower, a prisoner of his own poor choice. Back in the village, Isabelle stood by the wooden gate, her eyes fixed on the forest path. The stars began to peek through the clouds, but her father was nowhere to be seen. She paced back and forth, her vibrant red curls bouncing with every nervous step. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the frantic sound of hooves. It was Maurice's faithful horse, Philippe, breathless and alone. Isabelle's heart skipped a beat. She didn't cry, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed her thick golden brown cloak and leaped onto the horse's back. "Take me to him, Philippe," she cried. "Take me to my father." The journey through the woods was long and treacherous. The trees seemed to lean in from both sides, their frozen branches reaching out like silver claws in the moonlight. The wind hissed through the pines, and the air grew so cold that Isabelle's breath came in white clouds. From the depths of the forest, she heard a long, haunting howl, then another. The wolves were calling to each other in the dark, their voices echoing off the jagged rocks. Isabelle felt a shiver of fear run down her spine. The forest felt endless, and the glowing eyes of hidden creatures seemed to watch her from the shadows. She squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, whispering a prayer for courage. She thought of her father's smile and his warm hands, and her fear began to fade. "Faster, Philippe," she urged, and the horse galloped through the thickest briars, guided by a strange, flickering light in the distance. Soon, the mist revealed the towering gates of the castle. Isabelle rode into the silent courtyard, where the statues were covered in ice. She entered the great stone hall, where the air smelled of ancient dust and forgotten magic. She followed a flickering light down a spiral staircase, her footsteps echoing like heartbeats. There, behind a heavy door with iron bars, she found him. "Father," she whispered. Maurice reached through the bars, his hands trembling. "Isabelle, you must leave. The master of this place, he is made of stone and shadow." "He is right to warn you," a voice roared. Isabelle spun around as the Obsidian Prince stepped from the shadows. His coral antlers seemed to touch the vaulted ceiling. "Your father broke the laws of this house," he growled, his deep blue feathers bristling. "And now he is mine to keep." Isabelle was terrified, her breath coming in short gasps. But as she looked at her father's pale, tired face, a new strength rose within her. She stepped between the creature and the cell. "Take me instead," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "My father is old and meant no harm. Let him go home to the sun, and I will stay here in this tower to pay for the rose. I give you my word." The creature stopped. He looked at the girl with the fiery red hair and saw a light he had forgotten existed. The light of true sacrifice. His fury began to melt away, replaced by a strange, quiet wonder. "You would give up your freedom for a stolen flower," he whispered, his voice losing its thunder. He looked at Maurice, then back at Isabelle. "Very well. Your father shall go free, but you must remain as my guest in these halls." The first few days were quiet and lonely. Isabelle explored the dusty halls, lit by thousands of candles that seemed to light themselves as she passed. One afternoon, she discovered a vast, moonlit library. The shelves reached so high they were lost in the shadows, filled with books about distant lands, ancient stars, and forgotten songs. The room smelled of old parchment and sweet ink. She often saw the Obsidian Prince watching her from the dark corners. He was afraid to come near, thinking his stone face would frighten her. But Isabelle noticed small kindnesses. She found a warm blanket placed on her chair, a bowl of fresh sweet berries by her door, and she saw how he carefully tended to the glowing rose in the garden, his large feathered paws moving with surprising gentleness. One evening, she found him in the library, staring at a book he could not open with his heavy paws. She didn't run. Instead, she sat beside him and began to read aloud. Her voice was like a warm breeze in the frozen room. She read stories of heroes who were brave and hearts that were true. The creature sat near her, his massive shoulders relaxing, his stone face shimmering in the soft light of the fireplace. For the first time, they talked. They talked about the stars, the music of the forest, and the dreams they both held. From that day on, the castle began to change. Valerius began to listen to the world again. He no longer looked at his own reflection. Instead, he looked at the birds he fed in the courtyard and the way the moss grew between the stones. He learned to care for something other than himself. Isabelle saw that beneath the obsidian and the feathers lived a man who was deeply lonely and desperately trying to find his way back to the light. However, time was running out. The last petal of the rose was beginning to curl and tremble. Valerius looked at Isabelle as they sat in the garden. "You have been a wonderful guest, Isabelle," he said, his voice now a gentle whisper. "But I see the sadness in your eyes when you look toward the village. You miss the sun and your father. You are free to go. I am happy just knowing that you were here, even for a little while." Isabelle looked at him, not at the dark stone or the strange antlers, but at the kind, sorrowful eyes beneath. She realized she didn't want to leave the friend she had found in the shadows. She took his large, dark paw in her hand, her fingers warm against his cold, obsidian skin. "I am not going anywhere," she whispered, a tear falling down her cheek. "Because I see the light you have found, Valerius. I see the real you." As she spoke those words, the last petal fell. But instead of the rose withering, the entire castle began to shake with a brilliant golden light. The mists that had hidden the valley for years began to dissolve. The grey, frozen stones of the palace glowed with gold once more. The ivy fell away, and flowers began to bloom in every corner. The stone on Valerius's face cracked and fell away like an old shell, replaced by the kind, humble face of a man. He stood before her, clean-shaven and youthful, his eyes bright with tears of joy. He was no longer a hidden beast. He was a prince who had finally learned to love. The palace was filled with music again, and the villagers from the valley came up the hill, led by Maurice, to see the golden spires shining in the sun. Valerius and Isabelle lived in the castle for many, many years. The gates were never closed again, for they wanted everyone to share in the warmth of their home. They always kept a garden of red roses, and every time the wind blew, the petals seemed to whisper a secret. That true beauty is the light we carry in our hearts, and kindness is the only magic that can truly change the world. And so, my dear ones, remember this as you drift off to sleep. Be kind to everyone you meet, for you never know what magic is hidden inside. The world is full of beauty, if only you are brave enough to look for it with your heart. Good night, sleep tight, and dream of golden gardens.